Good afternoon, everybody, again on this sweltering hot Sunday to the Sunday live chat with our very special guest today. Yes, he is sitting there.
Yeah, I'm sitting down. I'm not standing up, no.
Yeah.
I could be kneeling.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lol Tolhurst.
Good afternoon.
Yes, so wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan. Forgive me if I geek out a little.
That's all right. It's allowed. We're in safe hands here, I think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were just comparing how hot it was in our respective places here today, and I was saying that I think it's the hottest it's ever been in the 22 years I've lived here. And you're sitting in an air-conditioned environment there. It looks darkened. Yes. You're safe?
Yes, it's my little studio. Actually, the good thing about the pandemic is I actually finally cleared out my working space, you know, because as every touring musician knows, you know, you're on the road and then you're at home to recover for a few weeks and then you're back out again. And for years I haven't had the time to really sort out. I removed 2 dumpsters full of garbage from this place, you know.
Wow.
I moved here 25 years ago, so I had boxes I hadn't opened up in 25 years, and I found some amazing things. Actually, I found a lot of old gear that was really, you know, interesting to you. I found some like old emulator samplers and things. Yeah.
That type of stuff really interests me too. I also recently did that, and then you'll come across something you just can't even remember.
Yeah.
What was it that you found that was the most exciting thing?
Well, the most exciting thing for me was about 10 years ago. I came in here and I smelt that smell of a rat that had died somewhere in the building, and I never found him. I never found him at all until, you know, about a month ago. So I opened a box and there was his desiccated remains, you know. So I gave him a decent burial and put him in the dumpster, and that was it. But no, I mean, I found some, like I was saying, I found a couple of old emulator rack modules, and they have like some really nice filters inside. I gave them to, I'm just working on an album right now, so I gave them to our producer, and I said, you know, if you can get, I'm going to try and get this other one working, but you're welcome to have this one because you switch it on and it's instant 1980s the second you switch it on and play it, you know. So I said, you know, this is my little gift to you. So
it's those old Curtis filters on those. They just didn't make them like they used to.
No, that's right. They certainly didn't. So I'm trying to get hold of Mr. Bruce Forrett and have him repair the well, I've got the number 3 that has the Curtis filter on. So I want to see if he can get it up and running for me.
Were you using a lot of samplers and stuff like that through time?
Yeah, you know, I think the period when we started, and we, you know, initially we didn't have enough funding or anything really to get everything that we needed. But as things progressed, I always say, you know, I tried to drag the rest of the band out of their Luddite ways, you know, basically anything they couldn't hit or bang, that they weren't interested. But I bought a first Apple Mac in London from the only place you could buy it in London in 1984-5, I think. And I didn't have any computer knowledge. We were working with Steve Nye producing us for the Walk single. And he said to me, you know, we're all going to have to learn computers because everything in the studio is going to be run by the computer. And he was absolutely right. So I took it on myself to learn how to work. And, you know, after about a year of like sort of trying to figure out what was going on, I'd take it back in pieces and say, please help me, to the people in the store. At the time, I think it was only me and John Paul Jones that had a Mac for music. But, you know, it's very strange. But, you know, and that was when nobody had email except my lawyer. So we would just send each other messages. But, you know, it was good. So we sort of, we went into that arena. And then Peter Gabriel used to have this is when I was living in London. He had a store called Psycho, which only had like synclaviers, emulators, Simmons, had all these things. And, you know, you couldn't sort of walk into the store. You had to have an appointment. And I would go there and see things. And then I would talk to Robert and say, I really think we should get this. This is going to sound great. And so actually now when I listen back to some of the sort of mid-80s albums, I can hear the points where I upgraded to the next emulator and the next thing, you know. So
Steve Nye, he was the producer of Japan, the Tin Drum, was he not?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that's the reason we got him.
And what a brilliant producer he was at the time, kind of like, was he kind of like efficient at that time at like mixing sort of what would be the beginning of say that computer electronic era with live drumming? I think Steve Jansen was also doing a similar approach. Was this how the songs like The Walk and that era when you and Robert were just composing, there was such a noticeable difference, obviously, from the earlier times? Was that because you had adapted this sort of like new format?
Yeah, I mean, you know, at that point, say, for instance, when we did The Walk, there was only two of us, you know, in the band. And up until that time, we'd done 4 albums with, you know, a 3-piece, a 4-piece, but very traditional kind of band instrumentation, you know, guitar, bass, drums. And then at the point where it was only 2 of us, that's really when I changed over from doing from drums to keyboards, because I had an interest in the new electronic stuff that was coming out, how you could do things in a different way. So when we came to do The Walk, we never really had a producer. We'd always had like engineers that we'd worked with that, you know, produced with us really. And so at the point where we thought, well, we'd like to do something that's really totally, as much as possible, electronic. We thought, well, we get Steve Nye, because we liked the album Tin Drum that he'd done with Japan, because he was good at making electronic instruments sound almost acoustic. That's what we liked. We liked that out of him. And so for the Walk and that whole EP, we had an Oberheim system with, you know, the drum machine DMX and OB8, and I think there's another part to it, I can't remember. But basically everything on there came that was programmed, except for the guitar and the voice, you know. So it was a completely different way of working. And I also learned a very useful phrase, which I still use now, from Steve Nye. I spent a morning working on the gig. We were in the studio, I don't know, for about 10 days maybe. And on the second day, I'm desperately trying to figure out how the Oberheim sequencer works. And I'm, you know, I'm like a monkey pressing buttons and stuff and that. And he turned around to me and he said, Lol, he said, you know what that needs? I said, what, Steve, what does it need? He goes, RFM. I said, what's RFM? He said, read the fucking manual. So he was right. He was absolutely right.
What a classic. It did sound like you were overdubbing some tom fills or tom stuff on top of that, or was that also within the DMX?
As far as my memory goes, I'm pretty certain that was all programmed still. Yeah, I mean, I may have wandered in the studio and done a couple of toms now and again. I know what we did do was we fed the sound of the machine out into the studio and put a snare with a mic under or over, and I had this like one of those Loratones stuck on top of the snare head. So every snare beat would vibrate the snares, and then we'd record that and we'd blended those together. Just, you know, sounded a little more realistic, you know.
Was that a Steve Nye technique that came in?
I think it was, because I don't think me and Robert would have thought of that. I mean, we did some stuff before like that on Pornography. On Pornography, the whole drum kit was just in one huge room. We took all the baffles out, everything, and put it in this huge room. And Phil Thornley, he was 21 at the time. I'm kind of amazed when I look back at it. I talked to him, and I think, you were 21 years old when you recorded this. And he'd just been working with Duran Duran and Alex Sadkin. So he got these different techniques. And so we recorded the whole set of drums in this huge studio, and then all the cymbals I overdubbed in a room that they were going to make in. It was popular at the time, like a rock room. They would coat the inside of the booth with just rock, but it didn't have rock. This was just concrete. It's just like a concrete thing. Wow. So every time I had this Chinese cymbal from Ray Man's in London. Every time I hit it, it was like it was going to deafen me because it was incredibly loud. But one song on the album, this was sort of like the point where I went over to the other side, onto the keyboard side. We got a little Boss Dr. Rhythm, and for 100 years, and we fed it out through a couple of different amps, like a bass amp and a guitar amp. So the bass amp would be the kick mostly, and the other one would be the snare. And so we'd started to do some of those techniques, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 100 years, I was really going to ask that question because it definitely sounded like you were playing with a drum machine.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, even though over the course of, say, Faith and, say, the consistency of the snare hits, the velocity I was beginning to wonder, did the DMX kind of like sample you at one point and put you in mind into their box, because the sound of the snare is just really so perfected. Well, how did you maintain that, or did you just have such a good meter?
You know, most of my when we got together in the first place, you know, most bands get together and they decide, you know, what other bands they like, what other music they like, and they start off by imitating that, and then they find their own voice through that. And we decided a sort of a slightly different approach. We're like, what don't we like? What are we not going to play? And what can't we play? And we won't do any of that. And so we decided, well, we're not really going to have long, big guitar solos. Okay, we're not going to have very elaborate drum patterns. We're just going to, like, I was a great fan of Jackie Leibitz in Cannes, you know, because he'd always say you have to play monotonous, you know. And so for me, and I believe it even more now, and I'll get to that part later, but for me, it's a lot easier to be quite flamboyant in drumming, because it's like anything, you're allowed to go out and then hang out there a little bit and then come back in, and hopefully you hit at the right point. But you know, it's not so exacting. With a lot of what we did, everything was so exacting, and you know, for something like 17 seconds, Mike Hedges had these little contact mics that he stuck on the drums, so each individual drum we could have control over, and we could add our own reverbs and everything, rather than putting it in a room where you just get an acoustic reverb. And we had gates for everything. So that started to get the idea, okay, well, we can make it sound very metronomic, you know. So I think it's really a question of that. I still like to play patterns that have that sort of mantra quality, more of a, you know, where you can get into a space in your mind and you could actually play it for hours, but the skill in it is to play it dead in time. I mean, even now, if I record in the studio, I don't, like a lot of modern drummers obviously use click tracks. I very rarely use a normal click track. If I'm going to record something beforehand, I'll set up a pattern on one of my drum machines and I'll play with the beat, because I like to have just that little bit of movement inside. Yeah. It's not speeding up or slowing down. For Pornography, I had bought 2 deep military snares from John in the Specials and John Bradbury. So these things are like 10 inches deep. So to play them, you have to turn, if you're going to get a true tone out of them, you know, because I hit quite hard, not as hard as, you know, a Bonham or somebody, but I hit quite hard. So I realized, okay, well, to get a sound out of that drum that doesn't have a sort of nasty undertone, I got to hit hard with the rear end of my stick. So I don't know, it's practice more than anything else. I mean, that was the thing that Phil liked, I think, in the drums. He would tell me, oh, you have fists of iron, you know, which was kind of funny, but no, that's fine.
Someone writes in, Jackie Liebsight's name actually translates to love time. I didn't know that. But
It
really,
translates to what?
love time.
Love time. Wow. Oh yeah, I suppose it does actually. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I gather you guys were inspired by Can and by earlier groups of that were around at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
living where you were, I mean, you had access to seeing probably the most inspiring shows ever to exist.
We used to go on Sundays because we were living on the southern suburbs of London. On Sundays, there was a club in Croydon, which is really sort of the southern part of London. And we would go, from the time we were about 16, we would go to this club, the Greyhound, and we saw Can there, all kinds of bands. I saw Pink Fairies there, all kinds of bands. Every Sunday we just go, whoever was there. But it was kind of, I'm sorry? Is
that the Fulham Greyhound?
No, it's another one. There used to be the Greyhound Ballroom. It was like an old 1960s ballroom with a sprung floor.
Nice.
So when punk came in, it was kind of weird because every time people would be pogoing, the floor would be moving and catapulting them up in the air. So, but there was a lot of stuff there.
So you guys knew each other from a ripe young age, I gather, right out of school. You and Robert.
Yeah.
And
I actually knew Robert from 5 years old because
amazing.
He used to live next door to my grandmother, and so I was a little kid and I would see him and I'd think, oh, that's good. That's another young kid to play with. And then he moved to the next town, which was not that far away, 7 miles, and then we ended up going to school together. Michael Dempsey, the first bass player in the Cure. I've known him since I was 11. So yeah, it's just that whole area, all the people I've known for ages,
Did you ever think that a jam with Obelisk one day in 1973 would turn into this?
Not in my in my wildest dreams, yes, but not really. I mean, even up until the point where we made the first album, we were like, okay, well, that's probably it then, right? We'll probably go back into working, our jobs or whatever we were doing, So it was a bit strange, yes.
Yeah, it's weird when you're in a band and you first just start getting in the studio. It's like it is a chance. You realize, you get a chance here, and you're going to give it your best. But you guys really seem to know right away. What I gather that you guys were all on the same page as to where you, as you said, where you didn't want to go and where you wanted to go. Was that as a result of some inspirations that you guys all achieved together?
I look back at it and I tried to think what it was that made it work, and obviously some of it's the right place, right time. That it's just luck. But we had two things that happened for us that worked really well. When we were about, from about 13 onwards, we were kind of interested in music and trying to do something. At 16, Robert's parents had like an addition built on their house, and they were intending this room to be, family get-togethers and stuff. And we just moved all our gear in. And up until that time, we've been practicing in the church hall, which is not great. My brother would put my drum kit in his old Volkswagen Beetle. It was a little chaotic. But at that point, we had somewhere where we had a practice space. That was, we didn't have any money because we had no jobs yet or anything. So it was a godsend to us, really. So we would go into the practice, and at 16 where we lived, the only alternative was to start hanging out in the pubs. And some of the pubs we liked, but some of them were kind of violent and really, we wouldn't have been that welcome there. So we thought, okay, well, 3 nights a week we'll rehearse at the Smith's house. And from 16 to 19, we did that 3 nights a week. So by the time we had met Chris Parry, who ran Fiction Records, who put our first record out and subsequent ones after, it's not that we came out fully formed, but we had most of it that we wanted to present done because we'd spent 3 years working on it. And people would say to us, oh, you know, for a young band that we've never seen before, you come across quite well. And it was only because of that, because we'd spent time doing it. Plus, you know, we had similar enough musical interests. I mean, the reason me and Robert started talking at school in the first place is because we were like both members of the Jimi Hendrix fan club, you know, and so we had this little bond. And then I would go to his house and he would get his brother's record, you know, like Trout Mask Replica and stuff, and we would listen to that and we'd try to figure out what the hell's going on there. And you know, because at 13 it kind of blows your mind. Actually, it's funny because I gave it to my son when he was about 12 years old, and at first he was a little bit bemused, and then he really liked it. And then his favorite thing was when he was about 13, 14, was to put it on when his friends were around unsuspectingly and wait for their reaction, you know, and they'd all be going, I can't hear this anymore. I can't hear what's going on. And they'd be distraught. But a few of them came across and then he'd know, okay, that's somebody who understands. So it was that we had a shared commonality with that, really.
The Trout Mask Replica is not really an album you can play for anybody that's young.
No.
It comes in time.
Yes.
But I don't know, music and then how you end up on an instrument is always quite crucial. What made you decide on the drums?
Well, you know, I think the thing was the camaraderie started before the playing, you know, because we all hung out, myself, Robert, Michael, we all hung out with you know, there was another guy, another guitarist that we hung out with. And so at one point, you know, the conversation was all about music, stuff, music. And I think either Robert or Michael said, oh, do you play anything? And I just went, I lied and said, drums. I play the drums. And then I suddenly thought, well, yeah, I kind of like that. So I persuaded my mother to come to the local music store and, you know, sign for me because I was far too young to buy anything myself. And I bought this horrible Maxwin Naugahyde kit that fell apart every time you touched anything. But, you know, it was a way to start. It was more a way for me to be involved with my friends. I mean, I think if we'd said, oh, we want to go, you know, like here, kite surfing or something, you know, maybe I would have done that. But it was the fact that that's what we were interested in. That's what we wanted to do. So we started, I mean, you know, and like Michael started out playing guitar, but then he played bass because Robert could play guitar and, you know, the usual things really. And then I dated Pearl Thompson's sister, and gradually I got talking to Pearl and I realized, oh my God, this guy is the best guitarist in the whole area. He's like genius. So I told Robert and we conspired to get him in the band, but that meant that his sister dumped me then because I wasn't paying her any attention, you know. So
just jealous.
Yeah, it's funny. Something that I reminded of her a few years ago when we played in London for the Reflection show. I said, yeah, you realize if you hadn't dumped me, this band probably wouldn't have been here, you know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of lucky that you guys didn't end up with solos in the band, being that, you know, Robert had an interest in Jimi Hendrix, and that's that side of things. You could have had like the flaming solos right away.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, for me, my interest in Hendrix is I still love Axis Boulder's Love's one of my favorite albums ever, and not just because it was something I discovered at a young place, because I actually think like the songwriting and and lyrically as well, it's great, and I love everything on that album. I even love the song that Noel Redding sings. But Mitch Mitchell was the other thing that I liked.
Yeah, for sure.
Just his free form playing that was just so brilliant, you know.
The Woodstock set, to watch that thing is pretty incredible. It almost seems like they'll fall apart at just any second, but just miraculously never fall apart. It's just like right on the hinge of like, But when did you guys like realize that, okay, you've really got your first song that is like, what was the song that shook you when you wrote it as a bunch of lads together? Was there a song that finally came and then you said, oh wow, it's a real song?
You know, we went through several periods. Of course, like everybody, you know, we learned a few other people's songs, and you know, we learned like some Bowie songs and stuff, and we did a Hendrix song as well. We did Foxy Lady, which we put on the first album. But
Nice. I'd love to hear that.
yeah, but it's the only song, it's the only Cure song that's not sung by Robert. Michael sang it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We for a period there, we decided we'd do songs as trilogies. So we had 3 songs that would join all together, and we would just go from one bit into the next. And that seemed a little too prog for us at the point, you know, because you've got to remember the end of the 70s, the predominant music was either prog or disco, you know.
Right.
So at some point we decided, okay, well, I was talking to my partner Budgie about this the other day. You know, we forget where disco actually came in for like early punk and that, because it was the 4 on the Floor, you know, which became part of things like you know, the Gang of Four, all these bands, and the Cure for a greater extent. I probably think when we first started like 10:15 Saturday night, and we realized we had something that had a powerful chorus and you know, just moved along with a feeling. And then I think on the second album, because the first album, you know, you do what every band does. We rehearsed, well, we recorded all the songs that we played for the last 3 years, you know. So that was basically went and played our set and then left. For 17 seconds, we were thinking, okay, now we've got a chance to do another album, but it's our album, and we don't have to try and tailor it to anything. So something like a Forest was where we really felt, okay, now we've done something that's, I love the way that always sounds, it's not on the edge, but it sounds like it's moving forward, but it stands still at the same time, all the time. And that was what we tried to capture rhythmically for a long time.
Absolutely legendary song. You know, I don't think anybody will ever forget the first time they ever heard that song. I went to a party, and it was odd because it was one of those parties where, as you say, it was like prog and like all sorts of music being played. But then my girlfriend at the time played this single.
Oh, right.
And I was like, it was something that she played it. She would take off, you know, put it on, take it off, and then she put it on 3 songs later, and nobody minded. It just kept on coming on every third song, and she would just dance her heart out throughout the entire time. But I mean, it was an absolute like time that you can never forget the first time you heard that song. But yeah,
it was a favorite of mine to play live forever, you know, because it's very.
How did you guys coin that? Was it just something, a matter of sitting around? And I mean, because you know what's kind of funny is it's like a very simple guitar line. It was probably the only guitar line I could ever play. But then all of a sudden, it's like,
I mean, I remember for most of 17 seconds, we did that at the Smith's house. We rehearsed it, and a lot of stuff came from just jams, you know, just sitting in there and playing. Sometimes things would come from a title. You know, I thought of the title, A Forest. Robert played me some things that he'd been recording. He had this little organ, which had a little tape recorder in it, and it had a little drum machine, and it had bass pedals. So he could play, you know, very skeletal versions of things that he thought about. And they also had an old pump harmonium that we would try and play.
Oh, I love those. I have one too.
Yeah, right. They're kind of cool, sound very gothic-y. So we would sit there, one of us would pump the pedals and the other one would play. So we would, you know, Robert would play something like that to me and Michael, and we go, okay, I can see something to fit there. And then we'd jam it out. And that's how the whole of 17 seconds kind of started. And then Michael left, I think just after we'd done a Forest, after we'd been thinking about doing a Forest. And then we got Simon, who's still there, and Matthew, because we thought, we're going to change a band, we're going to have a different color in there as well, you know. And
so you wrote A Forest with Michael, with
yeah, as I remember, we started to play it with him and that. I mean, it's either that or Play for Day, one of those two. We started to have the bare bones of it, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I've also read that you guys weren't entirely satisfied with the way the first album had turned out. But
yeah.
when you look back on it, you must now say, what am I talking about? There's just some absolute classics.
To me, I always liked it. Robert had some misgivings, I think mainly because, and you know, he might say otherwise, but my memory is we were very young. We knew what a studio was, but we didn't know how to operate it or whatever, you know. So our input on mixing and production was not what it became. So we relied on, and I met Mike Hedges recently because he was in Los Angeles. So I went out for dinner with him one night and we were talking about that. You know, we thought of him as being like the old guy. Well, in actual fact, he's only like a couple of years older than us. But we back, you know, when you're 19, 18, he's like, oh, he's old. He's 21. You know, he's really old. So, so we would defer to what he would think about doing, you know. And then Chris Parry was in the studio a lot of the time as well because his office was right next door. So we would do stuff, but you know, I guess because we didn't have as much knowledge about how things worked in the studio, what you needed to do. You know, we'd been to record little demos and things, but we'd never done a full length thing like this. So I suppose we were a little intimidated at that age. So yeah. I think that's where Robert's dismissal of it comes because, you know, it wasn't his vision so much. The second album, we asked Chris, we said, can we record this ourselves? You know, can we just do it ourselves? Can we do it? So we actually, the four of us, we made it happen and worked on it, you know. So it's that's what changed.
It's great to have an inspirational engineer though that's very crafty around that helps you work. And you guys worked with Mike Hedges for
3 albums. Yeah. And you know what was good about him, and I told him this as well recently, is that he had the knowledge of old style engineering, you know, like he knew how to mic up a drum kit and where to put a mic in front of an acoustic guitar. He knew all of that stuff, but MIDI and everything like that was just evolving, and he was interested in that, and he wanted to see what we could go with that, and he was open to experimentation. He didn't just say, "Oh no, it has to sound this way," and that's it, you know. No, he was very open, you know, so that was good.
I was lucky enough to, I always like to buy singles. Look at this, Killing an Arab 7-inch.
Wow.
Hey, look at that, you signed it.
We've got both of our signatures on it, and I can tell, oh yes, and that's absolutely a correct signature. You know, sometimes people write to me and send me photos. Wow.
I mean, hope I earned some points with that.
Oh, you earned a lot of points with that, trust me.
And
I can tell you they're all genuine as well, because some people send me things, you know, especially with my book that I did, people send me, is this your signature? And I go, no, somebody sold it, put it in there and sold it to you. But, yeah.
I have a funny story. It's funny how, you know, it's a small world theory again. It's actually strangely funny, met you a couple of times, but when I was extremely young. And on the 26th of August, 1981, you guys arrived in Vancouver on the Faith tour to play at a place called the Commodore Ballroom, which is kind of like, as you were speaking about earlier, a legendary ballroom. The floor is on springs.
Yes.
And it was home to like probably every inspirational gig that city would ever host.
Wow.
And in this classic venue, if you had great sound, it was unforgettable to the people who saw it.
Right.
So I saw Faith there, and you had your classic drum kit with the rototoms, and I believe I'm going to say you had a couple of Sinaires.
Yes, I had the Sinaire. Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking like, you know, I was a young drummer at the time, and I was super into, you know, what you guys were doing, but to see it live, and it was, I don't know if Mike Hedges toured with you as your sound man. The sound man was on it that night.
Right. Well, that's good. I'm trying to think who it would have been for that. Yeah.
It was amazing.
That's good. You know, I'm wondering if it's the place I remember. It had big white rooms backstage which were quite ornate. Would that be the place?
Yeah. So you played there twice. You actually ended up playing there again in 1984, 22nd of October.
Yeah.
And I'll continue my story about the first one because this is kind of funny. You were playing a funeral party, and I was actually I was at that moment where I had to stand up, and there was only about 300 people at this show. And I could literally walk right to the front of the stage and watch Robert playing whatever it was that he was playing on the keyboard.
Right.
While you guys are playing. And I was like literally so taken back. I couldn't figure out what keyboard it was. Do you remember what it was?
Probably a Selena.
The Selena. Oh, yes.
Either the Selena or it would have been a Roland SH.
I think it was a Selena because I couldn't recognize what it was. And then so after the show ended, the venue was such a place that I don't even know why, but like I could just literally walk backstage. So I did. I just literally walked backstage, and I went right into where you guys were into your dressing room, and I just sat down with you. And I was like super skinny, and Robert was looking at me because I was looking at the deli tray, and he goes, "Oh, go ahead and have a bite then, mate." So I said, "Oh, thank you," and I took a thing, and then I was talking with you guys about you being in Canada, and you were expressing to me that you were about to go, either you had played or you were about to go play this venue in Winnipeg called Wellington's.
Yeah.
Which is like this like classic challenge. The biggest challenge any musician will ever have is to play this venue. It's like a strip bar 50% of the time and a venue the other 50% of the time. And I remember you guys telling me, we're going to go play Wellington's, and we had a bit of a chat about that. But
right.
I highly doubt you remember that. But
I don't remember Winnipeg. I remember Edmonton on that tour because it was the first time I had seen a large car driving down the street with cow horns on the front, on the hood. That was the first time I'd ever seen it, and I never forgot that, you know.
So I guess the second time you came to the Commodore Ballroom, you had already made the switch from drums to keys, and I guess Vince Eli from the Psychedelic
right, okay,
was drumming on this show, and apparently he didn't have much practice beforehand, but you know, fantastic show, and in fact that show was so sold out that I realized that what I had witnessed was the inevitable growth of a band destined for superstardom as far as that road went. And then, but by that point, I'd already considered you my favorite Ringo Starr of goth rock. So I was a little bit disappointed when you decided to move on to keyboards, because I always thought that your sound and your regiment was always my favorite. What was your thought about that? Did you just appreciate other people having to sweat and get the blisters?
Yeah, you know, it really was a decision that was brought on by the fact there was only two of us for a while there. And you know, I just said to Robert, well, what can we do? What can we use where, you know, you're going to play the guitar and sing, but, you know, maybe I could do like the backing with you know, some electronic stuff. And then I'd always liked the idea of electronic sound with the keyboards and stuff. And it was getting more exciting by the month. So I just decided, and also I wanted to be up front on the stage because, you know, I'm naturally a bit more open about things like that. So I wanted to be up there, and it just seemed like the right move. Now, when Andy first came in, you know, because we decided at one point, okay, well, we've got to play, so we need a drummer. And met Andy, who unfortunately passed away last year, which is very sad. And because he was a lovely guy, and I spoke to him, you know, a lot. And I don't know, I just, at that point, my motivation was more to go, you know, whatever we had. I never really considered that I was like, you know, oh, you're the drummer, you're the keyboard player, you're the guitarist. I would do whatever we needed to do to further what we were doing in music. And it's funny because now I've come full circle, because I like to play drums as much now as I ever did. And I've started playing them more, and I really feel much more at ease with them as an older guy. But yeah, I still have a million bits of keyboard stuff. I'm still interested. I'm interested in sound. So uh, that's what it is. And the thing is, going from drums to keyboards is almost a natural thing, I think, for a lot of drummers, because it's a rhythm instrument. It feels, good to do. So that's really why it happened more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression, especially when you get into, the world of programming now, where it's like essentially, you tap out your music,
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. But so later in that show on 1984, well, not later, during the day when you guys did your sound check, I was the guy that came to the venue and said, "Hey, you guys have an autograph session downstairs at the record store."
Oh, okay.
And I brought you down there.
Wow.
And so I actually met you for a brief second. We went down the elevator and you went into the store where there was like hundreds of people waiting for you to sign stuff. And so that's when I dropped the singles on you.
Wow.
And then I also got a chance to get Faith
Oh,
Signed,
Oh, yeah.
which is my favorite Cure album.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites for sure as well. It's funny. I want to ask you a question. So when you met me, was I pleasant? Was I kind?
Absolutely.
Good. Because when people say yes, and I met you in 1986, and I'm always waiting for that time when somebody goes, yeah, and you were a complete arse. And, I don't know why. No.
I mean, from what I could tell you guys, I mean, if you look at your history, I think you guys were in Australia again just before you had hit Vancouver. So
yes,
I can imagine that you guys are probably jet lagged, and I can imagine that there was always this time of where you have to deal with like the traveling and stuff like that. So, I've also encountered that too in my history. And I always found it's super nice to always, be polite to people, even when you don't feel like it. But yeah, you were super nice, and Robert was super nice. And it's a super memorable experience.
Something I've always admired about Robert is no matter how large the Cure got or how famous, his number one focus was always on the people that came to see the band. That's who he was concerned about. He'd stand and talk with them for an hours afterwards, even very late on in the career. I mean, nowadays maybe not quite so much, because if he's got to sing a long set the next day, he'll just get out quickly so that he doesn't have to talk. But in general, no, he always wants to talk to the people that put us where we are. That's exactly the right reason too.
That's a good reason to be, and possibly the reason why he's where he's gone today is no one can say bad things, and that's important. I don't know, man. There's like a couple of different periods that I like to say. There's the beginning period where you're kind of like fast paced, Lawrence, and then the second, which is like the metronome perfect.
Right.
And then you go into the walk period where I'm going, this is the best ever. Like to me that the Japanese Whispers songs, really I wish that period could have gone on forever.
It was interesting to me because I can remember doing the Walk EP, and we did it at some studio in North London, Jam, I'd like to think so. And they had a room, an upstairs room at the top of the building with a pool table in it or something. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, you would find me and Robert up there playing pool while Steve was doing something in the studio. And I can always remember like the trees, London's got a lot of trees still. So you look out over the rooftops and see the trees, and the clouds and the mist were floating up. And it's a very nice memory for me, very, very happy memory. I don't know, it's not nostalgic, but it has that the best memories for me that are associated with music are what ones of yearning, not even melancholy, but just yearning for something that you captured and felt good. And So I get it when you say that, because I think we could have done that, which could have been another avenue to go on for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely you guys were coming out of a period of, as I say about pornography, oppressively dispirited
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And was that as a result of something that was kind of like an exorcism to get to a place where you actually now had turned the page and you could see the new light of day in a new way?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very good way of looking at it. I mean, by the time we got to pornography, we were young, yes, but we were also very exhausted because we'd done 4 albums in about 5 years and toured each one of them excessively. We played 150 shows upwards of a year every year. And then various things happened, especially around the time of Faith. My mother passed away, Robert's grandmother passed away. So there was a lot of, just sort of acknowledgement of the
difficult time.
Yeah, the difficult times. And so when we came, and we went on the tour for pornography, the tour for pornography is the only time that, up until that point, every tour we'd gone on, we'd kind of built on top of it a bit more, and the audience had got a little bigger. And pornography, we put the album out little after we actually started the tour. So we've been booked into these really gigantic places, and they were half full. So it was kind of dispiriting, even though, the audience was bigger, it didn't look bigger to us. And so it felt kind of dispiriting. And pornography to play every night, because that was the majority of what we were playing, was quite intense, to put yourself in that place every night. So by the time we had got to Strasbourg, I think, or something, and everything just sort of reached ahead and exploded. And I woke up and Robert and Simon had gone back to England, and I'm left there by myself, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's not so great. And I think Robert's dad told him, oh, no, people have paid money to see you, you've got to go and finish the tour. So he went back, but then it sort of fell apart a bit from there. And then we all got back together again. Initially, Robert called me up and said, I'm thinking of going to the studio. Do you want to come along? And I'm like, yeah. Is Simon coming? He's going, I don't think so. So I went, oh, right, okay. And I went, and we did some very simple things in the studio, Ariel, I think, and a couple of other things. And when we started to think, well, yeah, that's one way of going, but that's a bit like before. Maybe we'll do something a little bit, different. And then, Chris Parry sort of threw down the gauntlet as well, like, well, I bet you couldn't write a pop song, and of course Robert's like, yeah, no, I can. So that's when Let's Go to Bed came out. I don't know, we just decided, when you reach, it's kind of like one of Robert's favorite movies was 2001. When you reach that point, you remember with the spaceship, and they reach and you get into that room, and he just walks out into the room, and it's all very nice and quiet and everything. Well, we'd come to that point, and we were like, okay, so now we just have to be. It just has to be this, something different, completely different, and it worked. It's funny if you to come on tour with us back then. Robert had this little box of cassettes that he would carry with him. That at night time, after the show, if you ended up in his room or something, he'd be playing these cassettes, and they were all things that you would not associate with what he was going to listen to at all. There was Evelyn Champagne King. It was all other kinds of pop songs and different things. And so I think it was just a chance for us to go through that and, take our foot off the pedal just for a second,
Did it become more fun at that point?
Yeah, it did for a little while.
Because you're challenged and you're meeting the challenge, but also it seemed to open up the chest of goodies to come. I mean,
yeah,
it could have been tongue in cheek. I mean,
yeah, some of it was tongue in cheek.
Really, really nice.
Especially when we did the videos with Tim Pope, they were definitely tongue in cheek, and he was great for us to work with, because he understood humor. Because he said something once, which I thought was a really good way of describing us. He said that the Cure can be the stupidest band you'll ever know and the most intelligent band you'll ever know in the same thing. You know, like he said it's like, you know, and he's absolutely right. There's times when I think it was more like a football, you know, crowd, or you know, then it was something we had really good, you know, meaningful conversations with each other. It was never boring, that's for sure. So
Those videos defined a new era as well, because at that time we were, you know, seeing shitty videos, and then all of a sudden we see a good video made by Tim Pope, Close to Me. I mean, that video kind of like was like the turning point for like almost like artistic credibility put into musical videos.
Right. I mean, we were very lucky because just about that point, what I was saying earlier to you about right place, right time. You know, MTV would just come out and had just started in Hell's Kitchen, in a tiny little place in New York. There were only about 6 or 7 videos out a week at that time, you know, so they kind of had to play us, you know, even if they didn't really want to. So we were aware of that. So we're like, okay, if we can make something that looks reasonably interesting, we can get away with it. And Tim's always been not so much tongue in cheek, but he's an anarchist, really. So you know, he does like to change things up, and he would tell me all these things that he was putting in the next. The only thing I also, Tim always made me do the one thing that was going to end up painful or end up with me, you know, breaking something, or you know, I would always be in some kind of awkward position in the video. You know, that was my role. So,
was that on purpose? Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
he was getting you.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I think those videos really absolutely define that era. I mean, I think like also the song "Love Cats." You guys went to Paris to record that one, didn't you?
So that, oh yes, Paris. Yes, yeah, we did. We went to the Studio de Dame in Paris, and it was really nice, happy time. Yeah, I remember that.
Was that also with Steve Nye? Did he go with you on that, or
no? It was Phil Thornley.
And so how does a guy that's like 20-something years old like already command like the spirit to bring that through? I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he was always a bass player. So when we went there, we needed somebody to record. So we said, Phil, do you want to come and record? And you can play the you know, stand-up bass, which he did. And it was great. And we just had met Andy at that point. So, you know, it was like, okay, this is a good idea. We can do this together. We had a great time. I mean, one of my best memories of the Cure was actually in a making of Love Cats, you know?
Yeah, I can honestly say it's, you know, I think like if you say name one Cure song, that's going to be the first song that maybe they'll probably say it. Do you have a favorite?
No, they're like children. You know, you can't have favorites.
Yeah, there's not just one that it's like, okay, that's it. That's the one that hits my G-spot.
No, they all do different things for me. I mean, I enjoyed doing the video for Love Cats especially. And it's funny because Budgie said to me the other day, he said that bit at the beginning where you're playing the piano, he said, I think it's really, really good. I want to try and do something like that, you know, with us, because we're doing things. So it's like, you know, I think that's one of my, they all have different parts that I like, you know.
At that point where you made the transition into having a computer and gear like that,
yeah,
were you able to say pre-compose a song and then present it in that sense of like, hey, listen what I came up with?
Yeah, I mean, we all did. I mean, for you know, that point, I mean, I think up until that point, you know, like say pre-Pornography, we would get together like a traditional band, play songs, play bits to each other, and figure out how we're going to combine them. in the very early days, we probably just jammed a lot and then picked good bits out of it and pieced those together, which I'll come to in a while about why that's a good thing. But when it got to the later days like that, I suppose we all had that time. We all had like either a Porter studio or something at home. So we didn't have much time to rehearse or to get songs together because we were on the road all the time. Very few songs were ever written on the road for us. I mean, I think maybe a handful in Kiss Me, Kiss Me, we sort of play them on in sound checks, but very few normally. And so we'd wait until we finished tour, and then we'd be at home for a month or two, and we'd all try and write something, and then we'd meet with each other and we'd play each other our songs. And so yeah, there's a certain amount of it like pre-composition, but you know, even back then it wasn't that easy. You know, I think I had like opcode or something, and yeah, I think before that I had a Yamaha CX something, you know, with those.
Listen to this one. Wait.
Yes, yeah, and that was always it. That was always it in the studio. That's like I had the little first Mac with the little screen, and I go, okay, just bear with me in a sec. And that was like the catchphrase, you know, are we just going to bear with you while you know get things, you know, because it wouldn't happen that quick.
Was there any particular song that marks the beginning of that era?
Yeah, I think really The Wolf does, because that was the first thing we had done that was truly, you know, just like programmed, you know, like, okay, let's program the beats, program things like that. And it took us a long time, and we probably went around it a very strange way, but.
What sequencer would that have been then?
Say that again?
What sequencer would that have been?
There was a DMX, and then there was the Overhigh, the OB8, or whatever sequencer they had a separate sequencer.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
it was like it looked like the DMX, only it was
yes, exactly. It was like a blue and black box that looked the same, but just had a different name on it. Yeah.
Oh wow, that you know, they weren't that easy to work with. I mean, you know, it wasn't like you could just go right up to it and start working away. You kind of had to, as your friend said, read the manual.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, I learned early on with that is that don't set yourself up to like, okay, I'm going to write a song today with this stuff when you don't know how it works.
Yeah.
You go, but don't get you know, I'd have what I call, okay, today's going to be a tech day. I'm going to read the manual. I'm going to figure out how it works, but I'm not going to write anything, you know?
So as time goes on, I guess we all build our studios and we get used to all this gear.
Yeah.
Become more proficient. I gather by now you know, I've been listening to your Leavenhurst stuff and everything.
Yeah.
You're programming a lot of stuff now.
Yes. Yeah.
And you gather you've got a studio with all the goodies. You could present a song, just no problem. You wouldn't have to wait anymore. No waiting. I mean, but it's funny, you know, because I started off last year doing a project, and we kind of did it that way at the beginning, and then at the end, when we'd done a whole album, we shelved that completely, and now we wrote a whole album the old way, just go into the studio, just play, and then piece it all together from the bits you play. And that was mind-blowingly liberating again. Really?
So, yeah.
And what was this for?
Oh, I'm doing another, I've just finished it. I've finished an album with Budgie from the Banshees.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So we're going to put that out at some point soon. So that's my next thing.
Is he also living in LA as well?
No, he lives in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
But he comes to visit from time to time. And about 2 years ago, a friend of mine said, a friend of yours is coming to play in town, because he was playing with actually another American artist, John Grant. And so I went to meet him for lunch or breakfast, I think. Yeah. And, you know, we've known each other for 40 years. And so all of a sudden we were just like, okay, this is going, we should just do something together, because we never have, and we should do it. And originally we had a third person in there. It was going to be like the three drummers. It was going to be like, you know, the three tenors, the three drummers. We had Kevin Haskins from Bauhaus, you know. But Kevin, after a while, had to change because, you know, Bauhaus went out on the road and stuff. And we were doing all this album. And then me and Budgie thought, well, why don't we just do it a completely different way? And we met Garrett Jackknife Lee, who I had known through a friend, but I didn't know him, you know, in a working situation. And we just got on really, really well. And he has a little studio tucked up in the middle of one of the canyons there. And so we spent a few weeks in there working with him, and very interesting, you know, because we would start off every session by listening to records. You know, just get this reason I have a turntable here, which I haven't had for about 30 years. We would just take out records and go, oh yeah, I like that idea. You remember that idea that used to happen? And then we just like, that would be a stimulation to start playing something. And then, so we made it in a very old school way, but very modern in other ways, because obviously, you know, you feed everything into the computer and then you could just like chop, 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 chop. And so me and Budgie would record all day, come back to my place and go back the next day. And Jackknife had made complete songs out of everything that we'd done. So it was a revelation. It's great fun.
I'm very interested to hear this. I think I heard about it through Danny Lohner as well. He was raving.
That's right. Danny was working with us for a while.
Yeah. There's always been a close connection between you guys and Siouxsie and the Banshees.
Yes.
I gather you've known, as you say, you've known Budgie for a long time.
Yeah.
What's funny is that Siouxsie was really kind of like involved in, you'll see her picture very commonly in the very beginnings of the industrial scene with Robin Gristle, and
yes,
it was like super supportive of like the super super underground. And did that ever interest you guys? Or what did you guys think about that whole thing?
You know, it's funny because I can remember Steve Severin, you know, from the Banshees. I remember going along to see Robin Gristle with him. They played, it was something at the ICA or something in London it was all different bands, and we went to see a couple of those things, and he knew all those guys. So from time to time, yeah, I mean, you know, I think it was natural progression, really, you know, in lots of ways. So
yeah, it's like one of those things that you don't expect to see certain faces in the crowd there, but it was like nice to kind of see. I always thought Siouxsie was damn cool. I mean, I gather she is. I mean, it's too bad that she hasn't been able to tour lately. I'm sure she could clean up if she did.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I was thinking about her the other day. She was really not just, you know, an icon of the punk era. She was kind of like one of the first feminists in punk, you know.
Right.
And I always, you know, we went on tour with them in 1979 or something, and she was always very, very kind to all the young women that were around and came to the shows and things. And you know, I think she was kind of like a shining beacon to them as well, which was great. You know,
you guys played so many shows. If you look at your history, you see that you played with such a huge variety of bands.
Yeah.
Do any? I mean, I can imagine March 4th, '79. You played at the Marquee Club with Joy Division. I can't imagine somebody just like rolling in there and being like, just casually seeing that gig and being like, what did I just see? I mean, there's such a remarkable.
That was funny. That was funny because that whole thing that we did at the Marquee was like, we had played there a couple of times before, I think, and our manager said, well, why don't we do a residency there? We can do a residency. So you'll go off on tour and play up and down England during the week, and on Sundays come back there for every Sunday for a month. And we played with 4 different bands. One was Joy Division, one was a band from Birmingham called Fashion, and
that was an unlikely bill.
Yeah, and then, well, it was even more unlike. There was a Scottish band called the Scars.
Scars, right?
And there was a band called Local Operator, who were like a London sort of pseudo reggae punk band. Anyway, but it's funny. The guy out of Fashion, Luke, who's like very tall, like 6'4" or something, and that he got in contact with me a couple of years ago, and we've maintained, you know, and he lives over here now, and it's kind of amazing because he's had a very, very interesting life. So we can't, I always say to people, life is not, when you're a young man, you think of life being as like, a straightforward linear process. And in actual fact, it's to me, it's always been like, concentric circles. You're on one circle for a while, then you fall off of that one onto the other one, and you join up. And that's what keeps happening to me now. I keep meeting different people that I've been. I mean, even yourself, if you were there in Vancouver at the Commodore Ballroom, then So now I'm back on that circle again. So it's very much more interesting to me to think of life in that way.
I can't believe they even booked you with Einstürzende Neubauten in 1985. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
In Rotterdam.
Yeah, that was interesting. I remember the sparks flying off the stage and stuff. I think at that point they had all the the grinders and things that they were playing. So
it's just the perfect opening act.
Well, I mean, we had one concert. We had a painter. I remember that we had a painter. Somebody came on stage and did an oil painting for half an hour. I think they probably worked out half an hour was about as long as it was going to be before people would start throwing things. But I don't know. I mean, I always admired the Clash for having different opening bands. I remember seeing the Clash back in 77 or 78. And they had Suicide opening for them,
Oh, nice.
And that was great. I was like, me and Robert were sitting there watching it going, oh, this is different. It's interesting, and unfortunately there were some skinheads in the audience who thought otherwise, but Joe Strummer came out and remonstrated with them when they decided they were going to do something. But the Clash always had interest. So for us, it was always wanting to have interesting bands, mate. I got a record the other day, a new release of an old record that I'd worked on with the band and also the Trees, and I loved them as well, and both me and Robert loved them, from day one. When we first heard them, we thought, oh, they'd be great. And we've had some mismatches. I mean, I seem to remember it was in Canada. I think it was probably in Toronto. We had Wild Willie Barrett and John Otway open for us. And that at that time, John Otway would roll around on stage with like drum pads stuck under his shirt, play the drum rhythms as he was rolling around, much to the horror of our crew as he was, destroying microphones and monitors everywhere he fell, But yeah.
Who do you think was the best band that you ever saw live?
Best band I ever saw
from those days? Anyone that stands out?
The Stranglers were pretty awesome
in
the early days. Yeah, I must have seen them about 10 or 12 times. And they were always, I think they were probably, and, to a certain extent, we did a tour with Generation X. No, they weren't that great, actually, to be honest.
I heard about some bathroom.
Oh, yes. It's all true. It's all true. It's a true story. But
but look where Billy Idol took it.
Yeah, and Billy Idol's, he's a nice guy. So,
I don't know. I certainly didn't follow his career the way I followed yours, though.
Well, no, it's a slightly different trajectory. But, he had his times. It's I've become more open the older I've got, hopefully. I think back then I was probably quite not narrow-minded, but I was mono-focused, I think is what I would think, really.
So you produced and also the Trees, as you were saying. How many albums did you produce for them?
Just the one, just their first album. And Robert had worked on some stuff with them for like they did a demo and he did some work for that, and Mike Hedges. And then they asked me if I'd do their album. And I said, sure, I'd love to, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but I had a new emulator. So I took it with me. And Joe, the guitarist, sent me a copy of the album the other day. And I'd realized I'm listening to it. The emulator's all over it. It's funny. So I must have insisted I played on all the tracks or something, but I'll produce you as long as I can play on everything. And they let me. But they're very nice. They're very good, very different, so I like that.
So comes a time in life when things happen and then other things happen and then you find yourself in a place, and it's nice to know from your memoir, the 2016,
Yes.
is it 2016 that it was released?
Yes.
Cured, The Tale of Two Imaginary Boys.
Yes.
You speak of conquering alcohol addiction and
Right.
things. Congratulations to that. It's always nice to see someone come out the other end and be able to look back and like discuss like their successes of conquering such a thing. I love to talk to people about inspiration, about how to carry yourself through such a thing. But what is it that helped you most of all to step forward and leave that behind?
Well, I think, I don't know, it's more about getting to a point where you see who you really are, as opposed to what you might think you are, and being able to move forward from there. I'm very grateful to everybody that helped me along the way. And, I went to rehab. I learned a lot about what was going on, because up until that point, I really didn't know what was going on with me. I felt that I was just going crazy, and that somebody sooner or later would tell me, oh yes, it's like a family thing. We all do this and we all go crazy. And I had no frame of reference for it. And also the truth was, at the point where it started to go out of hand was the fact that, if we'd said to ourselves, okay, let's just stop for a year. Let's not do anything for a year. Let's go home, recuperate, write some new songs, and get together in 6 months and see. But we didn't do that. We just kept going the whole time. And, this, most of the time on the road touring is incredibly boring, except for the time that you're on stage. It's tedious, it's long journeys, it's, and like I always tell people, I said I would have to go to a city 3 or 4 times before I saw as much as the average tourist, being in a band, because all you see is the venue and the hotel and the road out to town. So I think all of those conspired against all of us, and to a greater or lesser extent, everybody gets damaged by it one way or the other. And so actually, I feel quite strongly about that. And last year I did, was it last year? Yeah, maybe last year. Did a conference actually in Toronto about health and for musicians especially. And I worked with Christine Guptill as a professor in the University of Toronto, and it's something I try to keep the awareness up for other musicians I meet. I have a friend in Detroit who runs a sort of service for visiting musicians that might need some help if they want to keep sober and clean and stuff. So it's always at the front of my mind in that way. I think, at the end, I was lucky to get the right treatment, and also I think I found that music and creation came back, because it went for a while, yeah, and it came back better.
Nice.
And that helped me, really. The writing of the book is one of those things that was a gift from that, because if I'd said to myself, at the time when things were going bad, oh, one day you'll write a book, I would have never have believed it. I would never have thought it. And it came about in such a good way. And I try to keep those channels open now constantly. Yeah.
It's super inspiring. And I don't know, do you practice meditation or any sort of thing to keep yourself going, or is it just willpower?
No, it's not willpower. I think willpower doesn't really work for me. But no, I do meditation. Actually, before we did this, I have a friend of mine who is like a massage therapist. I had a big massage. She does all different kinds of meditation and stuff. So yeah, no, I strongly believe in that. And I tried to keep myself. It's like I was saying at the beginning when we first talking. I spent half my life trying to kill myself and the other half trying to stay alive. So I don't drink, I don't take drugs, I don't smoke anymore. I'm a vegan, and I exercise and I meditate, all those things that it's so funny, because like back in the day, Pearl Thompson was always into those things, like for day one, we'd all be going along, drinking up a storm, doing whatever, just crazy people. And he'd have, a cup of green tea and he'd be eating, macrobiotically. And I was kind of interested in it, but he reminded me a little while ago, he said, yeah, you were interested in it, but you didn't do anything about it. And I know, no. But now, now I'm firmly on that side,
Yeah, that's a good time when you can start relating like later.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say congratulations to you because in 2019 you entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that was kind of amazing, really. I mean, it was funny because I heard from the people who run it, and the guy at I think he's the president of it. Anyway, he said, you might remember me from the 90s. It's like in the music business, if you stay around long enough, you get to meet everybody, at some point.
One day.
Me and Budgie talk about this, and we realize we probably, between the pair of us, we know everybody,
And we've met everybody in the entire music industry.
Yes, exactly, because they're all there somewhere. We've been doing it for 40 years now, which blows my mind more than anything. But it's like you're going to meet everybody. And so this guy wrote to me and he said, yeah, we're going to induct you into the Hall of Fame. And by the way, you might remember I worked for your agent back in the 1980s, doing Forte and thing. And I thought, oh my God, yes, I do remember him. So it's like it was very strange. I mean, I had to do a bit of persuasion with the other guys to come along. Like Robert asked me, are you going to go to this? And I said, yes. I said, I've lived long enough in America to understand what it means to American music fans, and I said, Cure fans would really like it if we went there, they would really do it. And he wasn't sure at first, because there isn't really anything like it in England other than the Brits, which is not really the same kind of thing. I said, no, people would like it. All the people that grew up in some little town in the Midwest and liked us when we first started and had to, put up with the slings and arrows of all the other, the metalheads or the jocks or whatever, I said they would really appreciate it that we're there. And
for sure.
And, it was so funny because they asked us, well, who would you like to induct you? And I suggested Trent. And when he turned up, the first thing he said in his, induction speech was what I've just said to you, that like, hey, I grew up in, this place looking out over the cornfields, and the sound of the Cure coming through the speakers was what, it gave me hope in this place. And I'm like, that's exactly, and I looked at Robert, I said, that's exactly why we're here. And he got it because he's a clever guy. In the end, he understood it. And, for that reason, I was happy to be there, Yeah,
it's almost like being knighted in America.
Yes, you're right. You've absolutely got it right. I didn't think about it.
For your credibility on any sort of like anything from this point on, it's like, can anybody give you any hassle on anything? You just like, wait, look, I'm in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Oh, excuse me, sir. So sorry.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to start getting T-shirts with it on. No, I'm not. But, no. But the people that run it are very, very good, and I enjoyed it. I got to meet a couple of heroes of mine that I would never have met otherwise.
Oh, really? Who?
The Zombies were there, and Colin Blunstone, the singer. When I was 13, he put out a solo album, and it was the first time I had listened to a man singing where I realized it was like it was non-misogynistic. It was like he was wearing his heart on his sleeve, and it was very emotional, you know. And so I enjoyed learning about that, and that kind of changed it for me. So I would write lyrics that were like, okay, I can put my emotions into it. And so when the night before the Hall of Fame, they have a dinner for all the inductees, you know, and I was there and I was telling somebody this story that I just told you, and they said, "Oh, Colin Bloodstone's right there, like 10 foot behind you, talking to somebody at the bar." So I went over and put my arm around his shoulder. I think he was a bit surprised at first, you know, like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And I told him the story, and he was like, "Oh my God," he said, "I'm overwhelmed. That's so great." So, whatever happens to you, I still think it's great if you can remain a fan, you know.
Absolutely.
I was a fan of them, and then I watched them, and they were, you know, Roxy Music was pretty good, but I tell you what, the Zombies were great that night. They were absolutely great, you know. So it was good.
It's really interesting for me too, because in our band in 1988, Trent was the opening band that we toured with, and they didn't even have an album up yet. Right. So I watched him go from that to where he's gone now, and I gather this year he is now Hall of Fame inductee. So
yes. Well, yeah. The good thing about being, you know, this is going to sound like the old boys club, but you know, once you get inducted into it, you get the opportunity to vote. So they gave me a form this year and said you could vote for 5 different bands, and I voted for 5 different bands. 3 of them got in, and Trent was one, and Depeche Mode were another one, and I'm trying to think who else got in that I voted for. I voted for Kraftwerk, but they didn't get in.
I can't believe Kraftwerk isn't in there.
No, I can't believe it either. They should be there.
Inspirational bands of all time.
Yeah, Kraftwerk should definitely be in there. And I think I voted for T-Rex. Did they get in there? Maybe they got in there.
I can't believe they're not in there.
No, kind of amazing.
Did you ever like Yellow Magic Orchestra?
Yes. Ruchi Sakamoto, great.
Yeah, I thought the drummer of YMO, Yukihiro Takahashi, is up on my list of fabulous drummers.
Yes.
The list that you're on as well. It was so interesting to see that whole connection between Steve and I in Japan. I was just wondering how much further that went. Did you ever know Steve Jansen?
No, but I'll tell you a funny story. When we were first starting, we saw this advert on the back of the Melody Maker, and it said it had this big, large American motorcycle with this disco singer on with a big afro, and it said something like, "Get up off of your ass and send us your tape," you know, and it was Hansa Ariola Records. Right. So they asked us to come for an audition, and we went for the audition, and it was a very strange audition, and it was very strange because it was in the studio that we recorded our first album later, like about a couple of years later. So they said, "Okay, well, we'll sign you." And we're like, "Well, do you want to hear our songs?" And they're like, "No, not really. You know, we want to hear you. You know, we like, you look good. So we were just another boy band, right?" And the only other band they signed at the time, at the same thing, was Japan.
Yeah.
And Japan actually put out an album or 2 with them, I think. So, you know, it was completely different. So that's our only connection, really, you know, there.
That was like a contest, wasn't it? That you guys were.
Yes, it was a contest. It was a contest.
So they actually won that contest, and
they won. They won. We won, and there was a couple of other bands that, you know, went into obscurity. But Japan and The Cure were the 2 bands that they signed. And, you know, after about 6 months to a year, we kind of, you know, we got fed up with them, and they got fed up with us, and we left. And for a little while there, you know, we were like, "Oh, what's going to happen? It's terrible." And but you know, one door closes, another opens, right? So.
And then Chris Perry comes along and Fiction, and then saves saves the day by having like what seems to be a very devoted
You know
career.
what I liked at the Hall of Fame was that Robert thanked him as well, because
Yes.
you know I've always known, you know, and for a while it wasn't terribly political to say it, but I always knew that without, you know, the Cure would have been the Cure, whatever, but we wouldn't have succeeded in the same way if it hadn't been for him, because you know he had the vision. The thing that I thought was good was me and Robert would go and see him, talk about the things that we would like to do, and then he would go and talk to, you know, the big labels and the big, and talking language they could understand.
Yeah.
And that was great. That was the best way. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, we were always on an independent label, but we were able to utilize the you know, the bigger machinery of the big ones, because they didn't really understand us at all, you know, and it wasn't really the nature of the beast for them to do that. So, you know, but he did.
And you guys didn't get screwed by any old deals, I'll bet, because of that.
Well, pretty much. I mean, you know, to a certain extent. I mean, you know, our first deal was signed in 79, 78. Most record deals, no matter what, you know, were absolutely terrible back then.
Yeah.
We have had to change it over the years. I mean, they always relied on the fact that you might, you know, and say to you, well, look, year 6, you actually get something really decent, and knowing full well that very few bands ever get to year 6, but we got to year 6 and then beyond. So the further away you get from that point, the better it is, really, I suppose, you know. But it's funny because now, you know, all that information comes in useful. My son is just putting out his first album.
Oh, great.
So, you know, yeah, so I get to advise him about what you need to do, even though, you know, dramatically things have changed. Some things haven't changed, you know, so.
What is your son's album's title?
Well, his band's called Topographies, and they're in San Francisco. And the album's called Ideal Form. It's coming out, I think, in about a month or so. But yeah, I mean, this is a thing as a father that I really liked. A couple of weeks ago, he sent me the test pressing.
Oh, nice.
He said, Dad, what do you think of this?
What do you think?
Check it out. Yeah, what do you think? And I'm like, okay, that's great. You know, something I never thought I'd hear, but, you know, it's really nice.
And what does he play?
He plays guitar and he sings. It's funny because, and he plays some keyboards. But it's funny, as he was growing up, you know, I would put like little bits of drum stuff in front of him, little bits of keyboard stuff, and he wasn't really interested in it, you know. And then one day his friend came around with this tiny little guitar and he sat there for a whole day trying to make noises with it. And I thought, okay, that's what he wants to do.
There it is. There's where he's going to go.
Yeah.
And that's got to be the most interesting thing when you watch your child gravitate towards an instrument.
Yeah. No, it was phenomenal, you know. And but it's funny, you know, because I say to him, you know, he'd say, well, what do you think of that? And I'd say, well, you know, I don't really play guitar. I said, but I've known a lot of good guitar players, so I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you when you're doing it wrong.
You would definitely know.
A little bit, yeah.
So we both find ourselves living in California some quarter century later. I mean, certainly there must have been something on your mind about possibly California being like an open door for film scoring and opportunities like this. I know you did 9,000 Needles, a 2010 documentary that won the Phoenix Film Award. Have you been venturing into that world much?
A little bit. It was funny because I had dinner with the director of that film last night, actually, and I haven't seen him for quite a while. So just, you know, very strange. I had a thing with him. He's done a couple of movies. I don't know. I mean, I like some film work. I came to California more because I wanted to, you know, long story short, I was married once and then that all fell apart. And I thought, I want to go somewhere where I was happy. Where was the last place I remember where I felt really happy? And California was the place. So that's why I ended up here. You know, my son was here, so that was a good, you know, thing to come here as well. But I ended up staying, and it's funny because a lot of people when you say, oh, you know, Los Angeles, their image is either of being discovered or being destroyed. You know, it's one or the other, right? There's no middle ground. And
Right.
my experience was not that at all. My experience was I found a safe place to be, and I found I found loving, really. I found people loved me and gave me support enough for me. That's really half the story of my recovery from things, to come here and feel supported and feel happy. And that's why I stayed. I've lived here the longest I've lived of any place my whole adult life. So, you know, I lived all over the place. I lived in Paris for a while, lived in London, lived in the countryside. I lived all over, but I liked to come here just because I found a kind of openness, that acceptance. I think acceptance, that's what I liked.
Yeah, and it's life. Life is what you make of it here, pretty much.
Yes.
You hang out with the wrong people, you're definitely not going to have fun. But
Yeah.
you know, you surround yourself with inspirational people. It's funny how many inspirational people I found here in the
Yeah.
city that, like-mindedly, we find ourselves all like hermiting in a bit of a way, and then we extend ourselves and we meet some really cool people. Like, I haven't met you yet physically here in LA, but I look forward to the day I do meet you.
Yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. It's going to be good. It's going to be
Yeah.
good. And you're absolutely right about it. It's like there's a whole set of, you know, you can either fall one side of it or the other side. If you fall the wrong side of it, then it will be death and destruction and all the rest. But if you fall the right side of it, there's some wonderful people here, and you know, I feel very much that it's my home. You know, I travel still. Well, I did travel until the pandemic, but I've traveled all over the world. The last place I went was South America just before Christmas, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I did a tour with my book down there, which was a lot of fun. You know, I went to Peru and Chile and
Nice.
Argentina. It was great. And so I enjoyed doing that. So I love to go places, but this is really home now and has been for a long time. You know, and you know, I go back to England from time to time, but you know, my parents obviously are not around anymore. You know, I have a brother there still, but a lot of my friends that live there will still come out here, and you know, so.
And it's probably like me when I go home to Canada. It's changed so much that you're trying to like find something to be familiar with. It's like, what? That's gone. What? That's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no, you know, I have one good friend who knows Robert, knows Mike, knows most of the people that I know, that still lives there, and he went a different route completely. You know, he became like this top whiz kid scientist, and he works as a scientist still out there. But he always loved music, so we always had that connection. And so I call him and I ask him, okay, Steve, what is going on? You know, what names do I need to know? And you know, what's happening, because I have no idea, you know, and he'll give me, you know, the FaceTime, you know, 2 hour, you know, sort of summation of what's going on in England. So at least I know what they're talking about when I go there, because half the time now I am very far removed from it. And but actually I kind of like it that way. You know, when I came here, I wanted to be a stranger in a strange land, because I find it much more stimulating. You know, my other brother has lived in Australia for 40 years, and I think the same thing is true of him. You know, he told me, you know, I needed to go to be somewhere else. And I think it's always been part of my family, but it's weird. My son that lives in San Francisco found a thing recently whereby I realized that, you know, my name's not very common, even in England, my last name's not common, but I found some relatives here in the 1930s from Michigan, and like from Kalamazoo, and I've seen pictures of them, and they're definitely related to us. And it's so weird, you know, to find out this late on in life. You know, life is always full of strange things, which I like. You know, I like it to be that way.
I would really like to see you hopefully rejoin The Cure again. I know you did in 2011. Is there any remote chance that that might go down again?
Um, you know, the 2011 thing was really good. You know, I had written to Robert and said, you know, like this year was the 30th anniversary of Faith or something. I said, and I've been playing the songs, you know, a couple of them with Michael because he joined my band for a bit. We were touring in Germany and Poland and Holland and stuff. So I said, you know, we really enjoyed doing it. It was fun. You know, it's Leavenhurst, and I said it'd be nice to think of a way to celebrate this. And I didn't hear anything from him for a while, and I thought, oh, you know, he's not interested. He just got. And then he came back to me and he said, why don't we do all 3 albums, the first 3 albums, and let's start off. We'll do it in Australia because if it goes wrong, we're far enough away from everybody. Nobody will know that it went wrong. So, well, yeah, they will. The internet.
What could go wrong though?
Yeah, what could go wrong? Yeah. And we did that, and we liked doing it so much that we put on the extra shows, you know, in LA and New York and London, and that was really good. I mean, you know, we're all in our early 60s now, so, and some of us are a little older than that. You know, there's a possibility. I don't know if it's going to happen. I always think it's funny, you know, you have that storybook thing in your mind that says at one point before we all get too senile and don't recognize each other, we should go out and just play all the records again and just spend a year doing that. It'd be nice, you know, but I don't know if it's going to. I actually quite liked the Hall of Fame thing being like the period at the end of the, you know, the thing. That's the end of the career, kind of right there for that. But you know, who knows?
Yeah, you never know, and certainly everyone's going to be there to support it if it happens. But so when you were finally standing on the stage, I was really happy to see you standing there on the stage next to Robert at the 2019 awards. But did you finally feel like you'd made it at that point? Was that?
You know, it's funny because when people ask me that question, and I always think to myself, okay, you know, my mother passed away when I was 22, but I think to myself, what would my mother, you know, where would she put that mark and say, oh, this is the mark that you've made it, right? And that would have definitely been it. She would have you know, taken out adverts in the local paper and painted the front of the house with it and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. But it's funny, you know, where the town we grew up in England, they put these little blue plaques on walls of houses, you know, like historical things like, you know, Tennyson lived here or whatever. And that they put one in our town for the subway that was the subject of the song on the first album, Subway Song.
Nice.
And they actually put one there, and I thought, well, if my mother was still alive, she would have been there for that, for sure. But,
that is so great. I mean, this is so great when your hometown pays tribute to you that way.
Well, they do and they don't, you know, because like the accompanying newspaper article had me on the headline, and they had 40 years of the Cure, so they had the local museum had a collection of Cure things, you know, and different people's memories, and the headline said it was kind of like a bit of a review from the book as well. It says, he hates us, but we still love him. Because I described the town as, you know, being grey and dark and raining and dark and miserable, you know. And yeah, so I won't be given the keys to the city anytime soon. I can tell you that. For sure.
That's how we all know the UK, though.
Well, yeah, it's true. It's true. And you know, it's funny. The other thing is, as you get older, you know, all the people that were your friends when you were kids are now in positions of power. You know, it's a strange thing. So one of my friends that I grew up with is now on the city council of the town, right? And he wrote to me and he said, you know, the pub you used to play all the time, the Rocket, he said, I'm going to see if they can put a blue plaque there. You know, I'm going to write it into the council next meeting. You know, it hasn't happened yet. So Actually, I kind of prefer it that way, because if they liked us, then we would have done something wrong. It wouldn't be good if they liked us still. But yeah, funny.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lol, for joining me here today for this wonderful chat.
Thank you for having me.
I've really enjoyed this, and it's really answered a lot of the questions I've had. Keep me posted on your upcoming thing with Budgie. Is there a name for that?
Yeah, well, Lol X Budgie, right? So it's
nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Everyone be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, and we decided to go for simplicity so that everybody would know what it was. But yeah, we just, we play a lot of things that you can hit and a lot of things that you can't hit, and it's fun. It was really fun to do. So
have those old snares.
Yeah, actually,
never sell those.
Yeah, we had some of those. We had some steel drums. We had all kinds of things. And there's the other thing, when you're younger, you really hope that a big manufacturer would say to you, "Oh yes, come in and take whatever you'd like to play. Here you go." And of course, they don't do it until about this stage. So I have to tell you that Roland were very kind to us, and so there's a lot of their electronic stuff on it. But
nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Please keep us updated with what, and I'll spread the word. Everybody here on Patreon has been extremely supportive and extremely excited when I announced this chat. So I thank you immensely for joining us here today. We're certainly honored.
More than welcome. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. And I'll see you again soon. I hope to meet in person.
You will do. Well, what I always tell people, LA is a small town masquerading as a big city.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right.
Well, don't melt today.
I'm going straight back into AC.
I think I'm going to go jump in a pool.
Oh, that sounds lovely. All right.
All right. Later.